Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Let's Talk ETC. This is our first episode for the new year, 2018, and I have our special guest, the community special figurehead, Anthony, also known as Pyskell, and he'll be chatting with me on this first show of the new year. And he's going to give us a lot of great info. He's got some info on latest happenings in ETC. He's always aware of what's going on. He's always on Discord, on the chat room, talking to people. I know he's always available when I have to reach him for something. And then a special treat at the end, later on, he's also going to share his process for how he analyzes cryptocurrencies. As I'm sure you all know, there's lots of cryptocurrencies, lots of ICOs being hyped up all the time. And you might be wondering, how do I know which ones are legitimate, which ones aren't? So Anthony's going to give us his take on that important question. So welcome, Anthony.
Thanks for having me, Christian.
So I'm always interested in hearing about the latest, about what's going on in ETC. And I know we got a lot of positive response from the last time you were on the show and talked about that. I was actually surprised. There was even one comment, they said you should do that every month. So there's definitely a hunger for up-to-date news, and I know people will appreciate everything you have to say. So tell us on this in this new year, a couple days old, tell us what's going on. What should we be aware of, excited about, concerned about?
Okay. There's not been any new releases in the past 2 days, unfortunately, but unless I actually could be wrong about that. But yeah, no, there's been a lot of great stuff happening in Ethereum Classic. I mean, first and foremost, we had that lead up to the monetary policy being activated. I think it was great, not just from the monetary policy standpoint, but from a community cohesion standpoint. You know, we had, even before doing the final update push, we had 90% of our nodes and everybody who was participating in within the network, supporting that monetary policy. So it really went off great without a hitch. And then by the time it launched, we were well over 95%. So yeah, that was awesome. I was excited for it. There were some people who maybe felt that this should immediately make the price go higher or something.
Right.
I'm almost glad it didn't.
I gave up trying to ever predict prices.
Yeah.
But
never predict prices.
Yeah.
And I'm almost happy it didn't, because I didn't want it. My own personal hope was I didn't want this to be like, oh, this is gonna pump the price and stuff, because a lot of people are very concerned about pumping the price, and it gets away from the actual thing, which is, this isn't Ethereum Classic and other cryptocurrencies. Hopefully they're not mechanisms in order to just make you a ton of money. They're things that they change the structure of how we do certain things. So it's really more important than that. But yeah, I think from a community cohesion standpoint, that launch was great. And then we've had a bunch of other developments. So we have not one but two new wallets. We have Emerald Wallet, which is created by the ETC dev team. They're very core developers. They constantly are pushing out updates. And now Emerald Wallet, for the longest time, I've used web wallets. I never really bought, because when I started with cryptocurrencies way back when, I never really bothered with the desktop wallets, or I tried to use them as little as possible, because they were awful.
Right.
There's still desktop wallets today that, you don't even get an installer or anything. They're not nice looking. They're very user unfriendly. And so I downloaded Emerald Wallet, and I installed it, and I looked at it, and I was like, it's great. It's really, the layout is great. It doesn't even need to sync the blockchain. It does light client stuff so that you can get started using it within a couple minutes. So it's a really beautiful wallet, and I gotta say, ETC Dev has done a great job with it so far, and I really am looking forward to seeing them add a few more features to it.
Right. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
that's great. And I know I've used a couple wallets myself, and when the interface is not clear and friendly, it can be really annoying, right? And then of course, and then when you're dealing with money, right, it's even more important to have a nice interface. So that's good to hear that the wallets are upping the bar. Yeah. So and then there was a second wallet. You want to mention that one?
Yeah, so that's Daedalus Wallet. It's created by IOHK, who they're doing Cardano and everything.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, I haven't had a chance to look at the newest version that adds the Ethereum Classic support.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, I think that's great too, because not only is it's really nice to see that interoperation between blockchains. I'm hoping we see a lot more of that in the future, where you know both of these blockchains, they can kind of benefit off each other. And I think it's also great that any of their users that are using Daedalus Wallet, and you even see it, they come to the Discord sometimes, or the forums,
Uh-huh.
and they say, oh, I got interested in ADA, and then I saw they were working with you guys, like, what's Ethereum Classic about?
Uh-huh.
So yeah, I think the Daedalus Wallet adding ETC support is absolutely great.
So that's a wallet. So conceivably, if somebody was holding, if they had, let's say, 10 cryptocurrencies, I don't know how many Daedalus supports, but it could be one interface for several cryptocurrencies, is my understanding, right? You don't
uh
need to,
yeah, basically that's their goal.
so you don't need to learn a separate interface for each cryptocurrency that you're interested in. So I could see how that would definitely be helpful. I'm not always interested in learning new interfaces. Sometimes I'm lazy, so I could see the value in that. Yeah, great. Anything else you want to add? I have my own thing I was going to mention, but I'd let you want to hear all your updates
uh
first.
I mean, sure, if you want to mention your thing. And I mean, I have a long list, so
Oh yeah, yeah. Okay, no,
anytime you
mine
want.
is not as useful, and I don't think it'll be appreciated as yours. But one thing I personally appreciate in the new year is, um, so I feel like ETC is kind of tracking the economy in this, at least in America. What I mean by that is, so economies have their difficult times, and then uh, fun times, whatever you want to call it, peak, feast and famine, and so right now it's just nice. I'm just personally couldn't be happier for my country and uh, other countries that are doing well economically. It seems like things have really picked up, which I know that's going to help a lot of people. And then the reason I said that's kind of like Ethereum is, some people have said, right, the first year of Classic was like the survival year, right?
Yeah.
And so now, the same way that the economy is much more enjoyable, so to speak, now we're entering the second year, and so now it seems like it's just going to be a great year, a much nicer year for the economy, for ETC. So I'm just really optimistic about seeing what's going to happen this year, and the foundation is strong, and
Mhm.
so I'm just really hopeful and excited. But that's all I was going to say.
Oh yeah, me too. I would agree 100%. We've had a lot of a lot of growing pains, because everything was we didn't have, Ethereum had a prior to them forking off, they had about a year worth of lead time. They had a good deal of funding already from the get-go. So you even hear today where people will compare Ethereum and Ethereum Classic, and yeah, I could. And the thing is, they don't consider really the history of it, and the fact that we've made so many strides in such a short period of time, and how that's going to lead into a great year where we start to see a lot more momentum building up. Even now, there's a lot more momentum. There's a lot of actual things coming out now, whereas maybe the first 6 months in Ethereum Classic, we were literally just surviving and trying to keep the lights on, and now we're really starting to pick up steam.
Right. And I mean, and it's exciting to some degree when you're at the beginning of anything. Um,
Mhm.
I mean, but it's also really stressful, right? I mean, I know when I first started doing the show, trying to just little things, the system to post process the show, and
Yeah.
getting the form, just all those little things. Whenever you're starting anything, can be really stressful, and so it's just nice to maybe now we're going to be awarded a year where we can kind of enjoy, rest on our laurels to some degree. So although that sounds
Hopefully not
like
too much.
yeah, I was going to say that sounds like we're getting lazy. That's not what I meant.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, all right. So continue. What else you got?
Yeah, so I guess that's a good segue too, because there is a lot still going on. So one other thing I wanted to mention was the forum. We just got it put
Yeah.
together maybe
Mm-hmm.
last month,
Mm-hmm.
and that was an initiative led by a member of our core community called Yaz.
Mm-hmm.
He's great. He got it all set up, and then from there, we've been using the forum not only to have a better historical record of discussions and to discuss different topics that maybe are a little slower paced than say the live Discord or Reddit. But on top of that, we have a section where we're working on improving the Ethereum Classic ecosystem from a very community grassroots perspective. So one of the things we've done is we reached out to Ethereum Classic Cooperative and we got them to commit some funding.
Mm-hmm.
And so they've basically committed funding to improve our testnet so that developers have a much easier time creating applications that run on our network.
Mm-hmm. Oh, now
And
just if I could just interrupt you for
yeah,
1 minute. So, for people that don't know, the ETC Cooperative is is a project of Grayscale, if I'm not mistaken, and it's to support proposals to improve the ETC community and/or platform or system. Is that correct? I believe. And so you're saying that they gave you funding for the forum as
uh,
well as other things. Is that right?
we haven't reached out to them for funding for the forum yet. That may
But
be
they gave you
something that
funding
Yaz will do.
for the test net. Okay, so
Yeah.
that's what they specific. Okay, sorry.
Yeah,
Continue.
so you got it right. They're basically committing funding to various projects that improve the ecosystem. And I think it's great too how it's all structured because rather than there being one specific group that does everything for the ecosystem, and this way we can kind of get some of that funding and then dole it out to different community members so that they can be part of improving Ethereum Classic. So not only do we get more activity from our community members, but we also get it still stay nice and decentralized. We don't have that one core foundation or group that's going to basically do everything and nobody else does any of
Right.
the work.
Right. Yeah. So
Yeah.
if anybody's listening, if they have an idea, if they see a need that's not being met or a itch that's not being scratched, so to speak, they could, yeah, sure, they can propose something and get funding. They don't have to be a member of ETC Dev or work for IOHK or to contribute. And so a lot of times in open source projects, people they volunteer their time, but now
Mhm.
if they can even get paid for it, that's icing on the cake. So yes, if anybody wants to do something, by all means, please propose it. We want you to get funding. We want you to contribute. We love great ideas, new ideas. So yes, good news.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Just make a post because yeah, there's still a ton that can always be improved.
Mm-hmm.
And then on top of the testnet, there's also funding that's been put aside for having a second block explorer. So that's always great because right now, gashtracker.io, while a great block explorer, it's got to bear the brunt of the entire network.
Mm-hmm.
So it'll be nice once that's finished to have a second option
Oh,
available.
okay. So you're saying somebody got funding to develop a second block explorer?
Yeah, Elaine and Corey,
Oh, I
two
see.
of the members they're currently working on that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that is so there's that from my experience with Block Explorer. So there's some technical challenges there. I was thinking about this the other day. So you could make a lightweight Block Explorer, but then with Ethereum, because it's so flexible, there's some things that are kind of challenging. Like for example, when you want information on an account,
Mhm.
let's say the Block Explorer lists the transactions that came from that account, but like Dexeron, his Dex naming service, it can have you can have thousands of transactions from an account. So that's a practical problem. I think the way that Gas Tracker solves it is it shows just 100 transactions from each account. So if there's more, you can't access it. So I'm curious how Elaine and them are going to deal with those technical issues like that. Also, getting state information that's implicit in the blockchain. So I don't know if they're going to what state information they're going to have on their Explorer. So yeah, I'm curious to see all their good work when it's available, what they come up with.
Yeah, that you'd probably need to ask them, and I would recommend just making a post on the forum about it. Another great thing about it is that everybody can discuss and present ideas and everything.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and yeah, so not to get just talk about that though, there's actually another testnet that as you mentioned, Dexaran, he's starting his Callisto testnet where they're going to be testing out, I guess, new potential newer features for the Ethereum Classic network. So the testnet I was talking about is the standard one that's very similar to the one that's currently operating, and then we'll have Callisto also, which I believe is in the process of launching.
Okay.
Where newer features that Dexaran and others are working on will be able to try it out. I don't actually have too much information on it yet. I know there's more information out there. I just haven't read too much about it yet. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to that. They're also with the Ethereum Commonwealth Dexaran's group. They finalize their Dex NS, their name service. So now anybody who wants to pay a tenth of an Ethereum Classic can get an address on there. So like if somebody wants to send me money, they can now send it to Pyskell because that's now my address on DexNS.
Okay. So you already registered Pyskell. You have an address.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, it's more for dev stuff, but yeah, that's
okay. Still, that's cool. Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty sweet, and the interface is nice and simple too. There's no things where you have to do things manually. You just click a few buttons and then you get your address.
Okay.
Yeah. And
good.
Yeah, so things are moving along great. Sputnik VM too. I think I've mentioned that prior time. It's been moving along, and now I've seen things where people have done little projects where they have the Ethereum virtual machine, the thing that does all the computing on the network. It's completely separate from the network itself, so people are able to run it in little devices rather than having to have an entire server and everything dedicated to it. So it's really cool.
Right.
I'm really looking forward to what can come from that.
Right. That could lead to a lot of innovation. People who knows where they'll stick the Sputnik VM. Right. Who knows what they'll come up with. Yeah. So good stuff.
And that's one of those things too, where an end user, if you're just using Ethereum Classic, you're not really going to see Sputnik VM in your regular day. But one day you're going to be using something that uses Sputnik VM, and you won't even know. And that's the beauty of it, is that it's this improvement that just benefits the whole ecosystem.
Can I say something about VMs? Are you going to mention KEVM by any chance?
No, I hadn't planned on it.
So at the Hong Kong conference, there was some security related talks, and they mentioned this initiative KEVM, where they formally specify and just do really hardcore testing of the semantics, the intentions, the meaning, the pathways that the virtual machine utilizes. And so it's all in the name, of course, making it as mathematically, as secure, provably secure as possible, or prove as many parts of it secure. So anyways, I was interested in that work, and I'll probably have a show sometime this year if I could get one of the associated technologists that's associated with KEVM on the show. But there is also some interesting formal work that's being done in the virtual machine space that you'll be hearing more about later.
Oh yeah, I read a little bit about KEVM, and it looks great. It's really nice to have everything about the EVM formalized so that it's a lot easier to reason about and find bugs and all that fun stuff.
Right. And
Because we don't like bugs on an
yeah, we don't
immutable
like bugs.
blockchain.
And I'm not that familiar with that whole provably secure and formalizing software. So my description, I may have butchered it and said something wrong, but I just know that there's something there that's cool and has to do with security. And so just take this. If you just remember one thing from the last minute of my rambling, just there is some cool security stuff, and I'll be giving you more information on it uh, in the next couple weeks or months when I can get them on the show.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
Okay.
Yeah,
All
so
right.
that was basically everything that I had. I mean, I've probably left something out, and my apologies in advance to anybody who's listening and is like, you didn't mention my thing. I'm sorry, there's a lot of stuff going on. So
Well, we'll
yeah.
have to have you on a show another time soon, and you'll have to then give us the any missing updates from this time and any new things.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so like as I said, people love your updates. So yeah, so thank you for that. And so now why don't we move into the second part of the show that we promised?
Mhm.
So you apparently have been um, developing a system for analyzing cryptocurrencies
I
to
wouldn't say I've developed it. I just
okay, and it's
no, this is my approach. This is how I
okay,
come up with it. It's not a definitive, this is how you should do it. This is just how I look at
okay,
things because I don't look at charts, I don't do technical
okay,
analysis. I don't understand markets. When I see those giant bars and people are looking at like them at 3 minute intervals and they have error bars that are as large as the bar itself, it
uh-huh.
just doesn't jive with me. So
Oh, you're
I,
talking about like day trading?
yeah, so I don't,
Okay,
yeah, that's not how I do it, and that's not how I make sense of projects and see what, potential they have in the long run, basically.
okay.
So should I go over this? So basically what I do when and again, this isn't investment advice, this is just how I evaluate different cryptocurrencies for myself.
So what you're saying, it's not investment advice. So at the end of the very last thing of the show, you're not going to say, and by the way, if you want my program, send 1999 to this address. That's not how you're going to end this part of the show.
No, no, not in dollars.
I was just
Send
kidding.
1999 in Ethereum Classic.
Okay. All right. All right. Continue. Continue.
Yeah, so buy my system. It's $300, one easy payment, and
That's right.
that's all it is.
Okay.
But so it's really simple because what you want to do whenever I'm looking at whenever I'm looking at I almost said Ethereum Classic. Whenever I'm looking at cryptocurrencies,
Hmm.
I basically just want to see what's actually there. Is it actually being used? Is there a community around it, those types of things.
Hmm.
So one of the first things I do is I go to their website. So I go and then I go and I look and I try and look for certain links. Like for example, I want to see, do they have a subreddit? Is it
Hmm.
active or not? If there's some users, then that's great. If there's nobody and it's a ghost town, then that's obviously not very good. I don't care what the price is if it's, looking like that.
Right. So step one, or one of the steps, is to see the health of the community,
Mhm.
right? If they have the basics like a subreddit and the websites, maybe Discord or the equivalent,
Yeah,
right? Slack. Yeah. Now
Discord, Slack.
I could echo what you said, and again, I'm not an investment expert, but I remember Charles Hoskinson in an interview. He does a lot of interviews, so I can't remember which one it was, but he I remember him making a comment that the community is a huge part of how he decides the validity, the value, the future potential of a cryptocurrency project. So I know he would agree with that point that you're making.
Oh yeah, I'd absolutely agree with that too.
Okay.
Uh, but yeah, so that's your first thing is you want to see if there's a community, and not only do they have these things, but are they active? Do people actually talk in them? Do they have meaningful conversations?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, roughly how many users are actually participating? does it look like maybe they're just the same three people? If it's the same three people all the time, then that's
Right.
a bit, could be a bit of an issue.
Hmm.
And then after that, I want to look at what the actual project is. So what have they done? So, I think the market has largely gotten over its ICO fever. It's
Okay.
now into its Bitcoin fork fever, though it's hopefully getting over that too.
Yeah.
Uh, and a lot of those things where you have these ICOs and these forks, it's not that there's much rather significant development that has happened. I mean, I'm not going to discount all forks. Some forks have very valid reasons for existing,
Hmm.
but especially when it comes to ICOs, what you'll often find is, yeah, you'll have a community, and yeah, they post some news, and there's announcements from the core team and that type of thing.
Hmm.
But then there's no product there. There's no code written. There's no network deployed. All you have is the token, basically.
Right. So they're trying to get funding before they even create any value,
Yeah,
basically. Yeah. Okay.
exactly. And they're trying to raise money that they could not raise through other venues.
Okay.
Like you couldn't get the amounts of money they're getting in VC funding without having an actual working product.
Right.
And so you have a lot of those, and I mean, I think a lot of those people, they actually are very well meaning. I think that some people are out to scam you, but I would say the majority aren't. They're well meaning and they want to get their product done, but they don't have one yet. So you
Mhm.
don't know what's going to be successful or not there. And
I mean, yeah,
so
I
yeah.
could see somebody in Botswana with a brilliant idea, and he posts a white paper, and he needs funding to hire a couple people maybe to get his or her vision done. I could see a legitimate situation where somebody doesn't have a product yet. Maybe they need a lot of I don't know, for whatever reason they need a lot of hardware to implement something to get it. But yeah, but the trick, of course, is to distinguish between the legitimate requests for funding and people that are just right out to scam people. So that's. Do you have any thoughts on how to distinguish between the white people that don't have a product yet that you might want to fund, and people that are trying to scam you?
Um well, first I would think that you should have some sort of a product. I mean, it doesn't need to necessarily be it's not production ready. That's fine, but there needs to be something there. Even in the most basic situation, if
So maybe
if you
okay,
can't
I see
dedicate
what
a
you're
month
saying.
or
So
two to
yeah,
actually putting together a proof of concept, the
okay,
core components, the MVP of
right,
your proposition, then
okay.
you
So yeah,
probably don't have any. You shouldn't be raising funding.
so if they
It's
can't,
my opinion.
all right. So if maybe they can't do everything they want, they should at least. You're saying they should have some skin in the game.
Yeah, there should be something there.
Right, they have access to a computer. They could work a couple weekends to post something to show that they've got their seriousness. They have some passion. They could do some stuff for free. They don't expect to get funded before they do anything. Yeah, okay, I see your point.
Yeah, that
Okay.
and if you in your situation where if it's somebody who really has absolutely no money and needs like a couple months worth of funding to try and get an MVP off the ground,
Uh-huh.
then that seems fine. But that shouldn't be these things where they're raising, tens or hundreds of millions of dollars worth of cryptocurrencies.
Right, right.
That's a bit much. I mean, to be raising, but again, that's almost old news. I have a feeling that maybe not 2018, but 2019 we'll get back to another ICO type of fever. It'll be called something else,
Uh-huh.
maybe, but
Yeah.
yeah, I think there'll be some more irrational exuberance in the future.
Sure, sure. It goes
But yeah.
everything goes in cycles. Oh, and just in case anybody's wondering, so MVP, of course, stands for a minimum viable product.
Mhm.
That's the lean startup idea that you just try to get something out the door so that you can get feedback and start iterating on your product. Um, okay. Anyways, continue.
Yeah, basically. Thanks for clarifying that. So yeah, so then the next thing I would do is if they say they have a product, I would go to their GitHub. And I mean, I know not everybody's a programmer, and I myself I do program, but I'm not going to sit around and read source code
Hmm.
for a day or two to try and understand everything. I'm not going to try and compile them myself because I don't really I'm not going to be spending that much money on it anyway that I'm going to be
Right.
worried about it. But what I do is I'll go on their GitHub or wherever they have their source code, and I'll look at the history. So I'll look at the commits, I'll see how many people are committing. Is it just one person? Is it a team? How
Hmm.
often are they making changes? Are they actually changing code, or are they just, making changes to the README and stuff? Because
Hmm.
those are all things where, you can see, even if you're not a programmer, you can see, oh, that's just they've changed some text, and oh, they have changed some code. I don't understand what it means, but I
Right.
can see that they're actually doing work, and that there seems to be and then you could see if your developers are having discussions or not, because there's a place where there'll be issues. Are people opening issues and closing them?
Hmm.
There's a bunch of stuff there where if you go to their GitHub, you can just kind of click around and see if there's any activity. If all the pages are empty, then you know that, oh, even though they have a product, they've kind of just abandoned it. Or, oh, this is a product, but it was actually just copied from somewhere else.
Right. So, okay, you
Stuff like
brought up a important distinction. So, community, that you started by saying make sure that there's, or analyze the health of the community. So,
that. Mhm.
to some people, community could mean users,
Yeah,
but now
that's what I meant.
you're also pointing out that community, there's also the developers community, in quote unquote, and make sure that that is healthy, and there's progress and discussion there amongst not just the users but also the developers. So that, yeah, that's a good distinction to make sure both of them are viable.
Oh yeah, absolutely. You need both. If it's missing either of those, I would say go find another
Right.
project.
All right.
But yeah, those are the two main things I do. Then the final thing I'll do is I'll actually go and I'll try and use the network. So I don't really buy tokens much
Mhm.
or anything. So if it's an actual network, I'll go and I'll try and use it, because from there you can learn a lot. You can figure out where the project actually is. You see,
Mhm.
like I mentioned earlier, uh, a lot of desktop wallets and cryptocurrencies are awful to use,
Uh-huh.
and I'm a fairly technical person. So if I download a desktop wallet and I look at it and I want to move stuff around and actually use the network for what it purports to be usable for,
Mhm.
and I have trouble doing that, then how much trouble is somebody
Right.
else going to have? Like, if it's not easy for people to actually use, then I tend to shy away from those things.
Mhm. Yeah, and if there's a healthy community, developer and user community, I would assume those issues should be taken care of pretty quickly. So you, by the time you see it, if it is something worth continuing to spend your time on, hopefully you won't see those issues.
Yeah, I mean, you would hope so.
Right.
There are times where,
Yeah, anything's possible. You
yeah.
see all kinds of stuff. Right, right. All right. Anything else?
Um, I think that's mostly how I look at and evaluate these things.
Now, what
Um,
about I just just off the top of my head, what
mhm,
about kind of your intuitive take? Like, could you also base it on, or how much value would you give to reading the website, the homepage, the white paper, whatever they have, and just see if it just resonates with you, where you're
mhm.
it's like, wow, this is really an awesome idea. I can totally see the potential of this. Does that kind of ever factor in?
Yeah, I mean, I want to make sure that the website has some actual stuff there. Like maybe there's an FAQ, maybe there's documentation for developers,
Uh-huh.
those types of things. Maybe they're hiring people. You want to see who the team is. If you recognize any of the names,
Right.
go check out their Twitters or LinkedIn or whatever they have.
Yeah.
Those types of things.
Yeah,
Uh,
maybe you'd call
yeah.
that, I don't know, buzz is something like buzz. 'Cause I'm just the what I'm thinking of is I heard a story um, about the early days of Ethereum, and Vitalik first was like you're describing, he was basically just a person with an idea
Mhm.
and maybe some simple code and description. And I think he gave a talk, I believe it was in Miami at a Bitcoin conference, and he was almost mobbed afterwards. Everybody's like, "Wow, this is just such a cool idea! You totally have to do this." And they're asking questions, and so that's what I was thinking of when I said buzz. And so I would imagine also if people were excited, passionate, and you just kind of felt like, yeah, okay, this looks like it's on fire and it's going to go somewhere. Kind of if you that I wondered if that would be something you would add to your list.
Oh yeah, absolutely. See, if the idea doesn't make any sense to you, then I wouldn't bother with it. I mean, maybe it is a good idea, but if it doesn't make sense to you, I mean, there's tons of projects out there anyway.
Right.
So there's no there's no limit to the amount of cryptocurrencies there.
And then
And
also, it could be something. The flip side of looking for buzz is it's possible that there could be something that is undervalued, right?
Mhm.
That maybe you can see that it has value, but other people haven't quite discovered that yet, and you're one of the early ones. And so that's when you could really be successful as an investor if that's what your goal is. And for what I'm thinking of
Oh yeah,
there,
but you
go
also
ahead.
have to be careful because there are things that are undervalued and will never be valued for
Yes,
a
yes,
variety of
and so
reasons.
that's where it takes the fortitude, right? I was thinking that what I was thinking of there was I was thinking of Barry Silbert, um, when Ethereum Classic was just being birthed,
Yeah.
and he and I don't know how he does it, because I'll be honest, I'm not good at that. And he just said, look, this has value, this is undervalued, and other people don't see it yet, and so
Mhm.
I'm going to make a big push into Ethereum Classic. And
Yeah.
right, and so he wasn't waiting for, well, let me see if there's this massive buzz compared to Ethereum, whatever. Anyways, so that's I wish I had that skill.
Well,
um
I think he was absolutely right there, and I think the way I don't know how he came to his conclusions about Ethereum Classic, but like for example, when Ethereum first forked, you had about and they had one vote, but it went very quick, and about 80% of the community were for forking.
mhm,
And that's a pretty large majority. But then there's that 20% who were completely against it.
right.
And some of the 80% who may have been for it could have been people who go either way. But if you're against it, you're really against it. So
Right.
you had a minimum there of at least 20% of a sizable community that had an interest in sticking to the original vision here.
Mhm.
And so that's a great way to look at those things. Like when Bitcoin Cash first cropped up, everybody's like, oh, they're all trolls and this is a cash grab and stuff. And it's like, no, these people, they may there are some differences on I'm not going to get into the technology about it because there are kind of valid justifications on both sides for different approaches to scaling.
Mhm.
But you had people who essentially said, we don't want to scale this way. We want to scale this other way. And then
Mhm.
you had people who said, oh, we can compromise on this and we can do both scaling
Right.
things. And then we won't, neither side is going to get exactly what we want, but we'll get some of what we want.
Mhm.
And so when you see Bitcoin Cash fork off, you got to just look and think, oh, well, there's a sizable community there. You can forget about their motivations or whatever. It's just that these are people that want to use this approach.
Right.
And so when I first saw that, I was like, well, Bitcoin Cash is probably undervalued
Uh-huh.
because, it's brand new and there's a lot of people who have been saying for years that they wanted to do this and they've finally gone and done it.
Right.
And so yeah, it's just that's one way too. If you know there's a solid project and you see something like that happen, you just have to ask about the community. And by the same token, you can see that Bitcoin Gold was a bad idea. I still don't understand how it's valued so high. I think the
Now,
market's completely irrational in it.
right.
But
Now,
this
just
kind
to
of
agree
shows it.
with
Nobody asked for Bitcoin Gold.
right.
It
No,
just
just
appeared.
to agree with you. My understanding is that Bitcoin Cash uses GPUs, graphical processing units, for
Mhm.
mining.
No, it doesn't.
Oh,
That's
which is
Bitcoin Gold.
Oh, Bitcoin Gold. See now,
Yeah.
now what I was now if you just look at that in isolation, I could see some merit in that. I mean, in the set like Ethereum and a lot of follow-on cryptocurrencies after Bitcoin use GPUs because it fights centralization of mining, which is the problem that Bitcoin has.
Hmm.
So if you just look at that one piece, that to me seems like a good argument for Bitcoin Gold.
Oh
Would
yeah,
you
that
agree?
in and of itself does. But you have to ask, was anybody in the Bitcoin community asking for this?
Uh,
And anybody who's not in the Bitcoin community, do they have other options for GPU mining? And they have scores of options.
okay.
But yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So that's kind of how you could see the difference between projects and what's I guess
Oh,
maybe a
so
little
so
more
Bitcoin.
worthwhile,
Okay,
a bit
see,
of
so
a
I don't keep up
better
too much
gamble.
on the Bitcoin one. So I assume Bitcoin Cash is the one that has the ever growing block size,
Yes.
flexible block size. Okay, yeah. So that is certainly something they've been talking about for a long time, and that's a valid way to deal uh, a good part with the scaling issue. But
Up
yeah,
until a point, yes, it does actually get more and more difficult to scale with that the larger you make blocks. If you start having blocks that are hitting 128 megs, you're going to have scaling issues. Without looking, I would say I wouldn't be comfortable going past eight megs. I mean, it's probably worth looking into. I know there's people who say, "Oh, we've done 1 GB blocks and they work fine."
right.
I don't know how well that's going to actually work in on a live network as opposed to some sort of test configuration where things are a lot more optimal.
Right, right. Once the blocks get too large, then you have latency issues, right? Communicating the copies of the blocks around, and that leads to
Yeah.
other problems, and so it can come back to bite you. So it's a trade-off, right,
Mhm.
between different values. Yes. Okay. Good point.
Yeah, because if your Bitcoin blocks are 10 minutes on average, and sometimes they occur, just a couple seconds apart from each other,
Mhm.
happens every so often, you need to be able to send your block within that small window, within the 10 minutes, and really within in well under a minute, in
Right.
order to make sure that everything still lines up.
Where yeah, and so if the block is too big, then it goes against that desire.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Makes sense. So use just semi seriously. So how does ETC match with your criteria? Does it pass the grade? Make the grade? Does it have a does are you pleased with the community and there's there good documentation and users, developers? What would you say about that?
I'd say ETC overall is doing very well.
uh,
So
I think I'd
it's
agree
not
too.
perfect. I think documentation for most of the Ethereum ecosystem, not just ETC, is quite a bit lacking. It's not
Okay.
very good. I don't enjoy using that documentation. I can name off the top of my head only a few projects. None of them are cryptocurrencies where I like the developer documentation.
Uh-huh.
And so yeah, there's still places to improve there. There's I actually have a list. Let me see. Refresh my memory quickly on places where I would like to see ETC improve. I think ETC is doing great in the community aspect. I think it's doing excellent in the development aspect because we have such a diverse group of developers that all
Mhm.
seem to independently work on different things. We don't have different competing versions of parity or whatever.
Uh-huh.
Every developer group, even though they're not working together, they're also not really stepping on each other's toes. I think that's a great dynamic
Right.
to see, rather than some other places where you might see very combative development going on,
Mhm.
where people choose try and force different paths.
So
But
doesn't it
yeah,
passes your criteria of not just having one person, one developer running the whole show, or right? That extreme example when you're right, you have several development groups.
yeah, absolutely. And
Okay.
it passes a good amount of my criteria. I mean, it's not perfect, but
Yeah.
It is the cryptocurrency that I am a little biased. It's the cryptocurrency that I honestly like the most, and that's why I spend so much time with it.
Hmm.
But yeah, we can definitely use some better documentation. We could use a lot more tutorials and that type of thing to get new developers up
Hmm.
to speed. We could perhaps get some more active blogging. I know I want to write another post kind of similar, showing up what's new in Ethereum Classic. We are hopefully going to get a redesigned website soon. So that's
Hmm.
also one place where we definitely need to improve. I've made some updates to it, but it needs to be revamped. It's a legacy website from a time where we were just trying to find a footholding right after the fork happened so quickly.
Right, right.
And yeah, so there's definitely places to improve, but I would say overall Ethereum Classic passes my own personal litmus test. I
Good.
mean, it doesn't mean it's going to pass everybody's, but it passes mine.
Yes, and if anybody wants to help with documentation, please do so. And if you want to submit a proposal for something related to documentation, that's just as valid
Mhm.
as right as development, software development work. So
Oh,
we
absolutely.
we need all kinds of components to keep the system running. So yeah, great. So I think we've covered it. Have I missed anything?
No, I think that's great.
All right. So once again, thank you for joining me, and to everybody listening, thank you for joining us also, so to speak, and looking forward to a great new year 2018.
Excellent. Thanks for having me. Hopefully,
All
we'll
right.
talk again soon.
Sure. All right. Take care.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.